truly a delight to be here in Australia. A lot of my journeys into the light have taken place in Australia, which I really consider a country of light. I really mean that. If anything is a country of light, it's Australia in a lot of ways. You guys living here probably don't think that, but I believe it really is. So anyway, I've been a medical doctor for 30 years. I'm an integrative health specialist. Which means I integrate Eastern, Western medical concepts. I integrate Western medication with naturopathy and homeopathy. And more important to me, I integrate mind and body and, dare I say, light, mind, body, light. Consciousness in healing is my thing. Although I love those tools personally, I use them and I buy them. I feel that we are the light, so let's learn to do it by ourselves. My two logos reflect the caduceus, the medical symbol, that's my medical practice in Hong Kong, there's 16 of us. And then this ancient Celtic symbol of unity, indivisibility, and something else. There are three actually. So up here in the green. And again, our two websites, medical and energy websites. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about the light, except a bit more about me first, in fact, because this is how I came to Hong Kong. Bizarrely, I didn't know it was a hot place. It was near China. They spoke Cantonese. Someone at a party just said, oh, my friend works in Hong Kong, and I thought, I'll go there. I got a job. That's really true. I didn't know one person. I was only in my 20s, that's what you do, right? I got a job in this tuberculosis hospital, which was a huge deal in those days, treating all these poor Vietnamese boat people who were migrants. I mean, we built camps and centres for them, right? Because they were flooding economic and political refugees from Vietnam to Hong Kong. But what I think is interesting, what the DNA strand here is for, and little bubbles, by the way, are my idea of the light coming from the DNA. What I think is interesting in this story is I didn't know that one of my forebears, my great-great-aunt, came to China exactly the same age as me, from the same area of the north of Scotland, as a single woman like me, to be a missionary in China. And I feel that in our own ways, we both feel like we're spreading the light. And I do think that through the genetic heritage of the light of our DNA, we stand on the shoulders of our forebears. And this is something that in subtle ways guide us through life, and of course we don't even know it's happening, because I knew nothing about her when I first arrived in Hong Kong. So, get to the bottom of what we're trying to do here, or my business anyway, is help patients. So this is after a workshop I did in California in February. This lady, I didn't realize at the time, was in deep grief because her son had just been killed. I feel a lot lighter. I had a very heavy and painful day. It seems as though white light appeared. It felt very healing, and something of hope was associated with it. So something in me had connected with something in her to give her this experience of healing. So we're going to talk about what happens here, what are the dynamics, and we've all have amazing experiences. You know, oh, I felt better after having lunch with my friend. Whoa, that therapist was so healing. I feel like a different person. What exactly happens here, and how can we replicate it and teach it? This lady in my office, it took just 5 minutes to do this light healing exercise. Before I was nervous, my head was spinning, and now my feet are on the floor with warmth. I don't know why, but my head is not so tense anymore. It doesn't take time. It just takes application and perhaps practice. So today, what we're going to talk about is being the light in our body, flowing into wellness. So I'm going to tell you about the healing effects of light, although thankfully the prior speakers have already done a great job of discussing this. Our connection to nature's light, our connection to planetary light, and using this light for our well-being, so flowing into healing. And a rather craftily devised a little left-brained idea for you that I will follow by a right-brained idea, so we can keep both sides of our bodies happy and both half of the audience. So the premise, we are inherently attuned to a quantum light process and interpret or interface with these surrounding energies, the field, unconsciously on a daily basis. The biological, neurophysiological basis of this is that our bodies are regulated by and communicate through a light network on a DNA, cellular, neurological, and enzyme basis, and quantum basis we could add into this. So this is like an intellectual premise, but for those who, and I love this because nowadays we're all on Wi-Fi, right? And isn't this what it's all about? We are bathed in this field of overlapping waves of Wi-Fi, and that's what Wi-Fi is. Interesting that we, in a very short space of time, what, a decade, we trusted in it completely. We're always using it and are competent with our methods of using this Wi-Fi. And we kind of completely accept it, right? Which has been a very short time, actually, but this has become so commonplace. So we're bathed like fish in water in this Wi-Fi, and as you know, that may not be so good with some of our biological processes, the Wi-Fi. But I think we'll agree that the light field, the field of our DNA, our genetic heritage is a different matter. So imagine that we're just like fish in water. We can't feel we're in water because we're always in water. We've never been out of the water. But we know how to ride the current. We know how to float. We know what whirlpools are. It can be chaotic. It can be calm. Like fish in water, we are so bathed in this field of light that we work with it all the time. Light goes in our eyes, and is it working? Yeah, we change that light from electromagnetic energy to chemical energy in the back of our eyeball in the retina, and that's changed again to electrical energy in our optic nerve. It goes to 4 places of the brain, and in 4 different ways affects our emotional centers. No wonder art changes us. No wonder color therapies change us emotionally as well as physically, right? So we are hardwired to transducing and changing light all the time without even thinking about it. So for the left-brained of us, the Rumi, the light is where the wound comes in. I love that expression because as a physician, sometimes the greatest healings come from the greatest pains, the people who have most to suffer. Eckhart Tolle is a good example of this. I'm sure you've heard of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. He was on a park bench as a student in Cambridge, depressed, at the end of his tether, contemplating suicide, right? He was like at that low level. And then suddenly he got this enlightening thought. And that was it. That was it. But it's almost like we have to be, unfortunately, in that state before the light will come in. Now, Werner Heisenberg was a very good friend of Einstein's and said, I love this, something has to be added to the laws of physics and chemistry before phenomena, but biological phenomena, can be completely understood. And Einstein said to his friend in 1926, you know, it's absolute nonsense to make theories out of observable facts alone. Nonsense. In fact, the reverse is true. We have a theory and we find the facts, which I think is very, very profound. So we have a theory, we have a thought, we have an idea, and then things manifest to prove it. So that's what Einstein said in 1926 to Heisenberg. Now, just for a second, since we're in the light business here, would you join with me in perhaps shutting your eyes just for a second? First of all, look at this lovely light. So those of you who don't want to shut your eyes, you just look at this light picture. Otherwise, let's close our eyes and just take a nice deep breath through your nose. And allow the breath to go out through your feet, through the soles of your feet into the earth. And then breathe in again. And keep breathing. And as we breathe, visualize that white light is coming down through the crown of your head. When you breathe in, imagine you're sucking it in. We now know that when you think of white light, more is released from your brain, which is an extraordinary thought. So in thinking about white light, we release more white light. We increase our light. And allow a column of white light to go through your brain. Allow the white light, the shimmering, sparkling, scintillating white light to diffuse through your mind-body system. Clearing, cleansing any dis-ease in your body. Allow it to wash through your body. Wash through your body, carrying all the tiredness of the afternoon. When you open your eyes, you will feel relaxed and refreshed. I invite you to take a deep breath through your nose and open your eyes. So, now we can talk a little more about light from our nice, relaxed right brain state. The electromagnetic spectrum is what most people think of as light. The slow radio waves, like the big waves of the ocean, they're big and they're slow, and the little gamma waves that are when our brain is in 40 hertz frequency. They're short and they're fast. And the colour range, the visible colour range in the middle where we live, right? We see, we eat, and we wear colour. And English is so peppered with expressions. I mean, it's an incredible language, isn't it? Lighten up, brighten yourself up. Black mood, and she's whiter than white. So, you know there's so many colour expressions. You guys are in the world of colour here. We use colour as an analogy for our emotions all the time, which is interesting. We've done this for hundreds of years. So already these ideas are embedded in our languaging. So when we talk about the light spectrum, you know, you've heard about the UV and the IR, infrared, and all these colours. This is the light spectrum. So this field of light, how do we work with the field of light to interact in the way that we want to with our patients? These are some therapists who've really broken the ground here with this. And Peter Levine, I've done work with Peter Levine, post-traumatic stress, talks about co-regulation of the nervous system. So we regulate each other through being with each other. We've heard of craniosacral therapy, where they talk about melding and synchronization. And one of my favourites was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Elizabeth discovered that she was an expert in death and dying, right? And she discovered that some patients were doing brilliantly in the hospice care ward. I mean, not brilliantly from recovery because they were dying, but brilliantly from their, calm point of view, their mental state. And she tried to find out why this was. Were the drugs different? Was the care different? She couldn't find anything. Then she discovered that the cleaning lady would sit there for 20 minutes with those patients, and they just did brilliantly. And she asked the cleaning lady what she did, and she said, nothing, I'm just sitting there in presence with the patients. So, it was so profound, this effect, that she then appointed the cleaning lady as a senior position who were teaching all the doctors this technique, which didn't endear her to them in any way. So this technique of being in the energy of somehow having a therapeutic effect on the patient, and then getting into the patient's reality. R.D. Laing, the psychiatrist. So I love these expressions. I've garnered these from my research. There was a conversation going on between your body and mine the moment you walked in the door. I love that, don't you? I just love that. And midwives will say, all babies, to be honest, the crying is the same, but just this will somehow seem different. Or a doctor told me, actually, there was a light above the baby, and I knew something was different. This child wasn't well. So this knowingness, gut feeling, intuition is not something based on knowledge or experience. It's very much based on an internal knowingness. And tomorrow afternoon I'm doing a workshop because I've tried to refine this down, and I have tools that can help increase this intuition, and even, you know, getting in the flow of your own life, right? Making the right decisions about things, not just in therapy, but of course intuition affects our whole life. So I'll tell you a story about one of my patients now, and he was called John, and it's quite difficult to tell this story because it wasn't an easy day. It was Friday. I'm like, you know, planning my cocktail in the Mandarin Hotel by about 5 o'clock, thinking I've had enough, I'm tired, I've had enough. And this is because I do quite heavy work with people. And then my least favourite type of patient walks in, and okay, he's male and he's tall, and he considers himself very scientific because he's an electrical engineer and therefore knows everything about everything, and thinks that I may be some kind of witch doctor, which is strange because in fact I'm a Harvard educated doctor, but I have my issues. What I'm saying is I have my defenses, and I'm feeling this is going to be stretching me. We've all got these people who push our buttons, right? And he's there, not because he wants to be, but because he's desperate. He's there because he doesn't think I'll do any good whatsoever, but probably his wife's told him to be there. Or he's just desperate, right? So I'm like, oh no, get this over with quick. And but obviously, you know, I do my process because it's my process, and I have an intent to help people. So I asked him what's wrong, and the moment he started talking, that was it. My heart opened in compassion. So what he said was, he was Australian, funnily enough, so I hope you guys don't know him. He said, I just had that idea. He said, I've had this headache and it's awful. It's a really bad headache, and I can't sleep and I can't work, and I've had MRIs, I've had scans, I've seen 3 neurologists, and they say nothing's wrong with my head. And obviously I said, when did it start? And he'd been asked that before. He said, it started the day after my daughter was killed in a car crash. And so a totally mind-body complaint, obviously. So in that, my heart opened in compassion, and I completely dropped my, not only personality defenses, but I dropped my, this necessity we have as healers to like protect ourselves, have barriers, because kind of we need to, but we don't need to, so it's complicated. So I dropped that, and I just went up, and we doctors are one of the few people who are actually allowed to touch people nowadays, so especially men. So I went out and touched his forehead, right, to examine it, because I can do that. And so no one else can touch anyone. So I just said, oh, I'll just have a look at it, and I did that because I wanted to make connection with him. I touched his head, in fact. And I just touched his head for a few seconds. And then I don't do it for more than 5 seconds or else it gets weird. And he said, oh, that's amazing, my headache's gone. And, you know, you could tell, well, I'll wait for it to come back again when I go out, because obviously he's shocked, right? His headache's gone. I'm a bit shocked too, to be honest. And so this is an interesting healing, and we're going to get into what happened here later on, the dynamics of what happened. I will go back to this story. So moving on, light in the body very quickly. Light in the body. The hands have been shown to emit electrical, magnetic, infrared, gamma waves, as well as ultrasound waves, especially the small area in the palm, called the Lagong area, okay? That small area is incredibly, and Qigong healers use this area, incredibly sensitive. They emit a lot of frequencies. Enzyme systems in the body are controlled by signals of light, and they're most sensitive to one colour over another by a factor of hundreds, which is really interesting. They're supremely sensitive to colours. Cell gateways and electromagnetic communications. Well, for nutrients to get in cells and waste to get out of cells, they have an electromagnetic barrier dependent on calcium. So there also, how many trillion cells were there? 30 odd million, something trillion. Anyway, every one of them has an electromagnetic gateway, a light. Remember, this is part of the light spectrum. And it will horrify you to know that, forget 5G, on the normal 3G, 2015 Professor Lund did experiments showing that the cell gateways in the blood-brain barrier, now it's there for a reason. There are toxins, like egg white is the most toxic thing known to the brain, albumin, okay? It should not be in the brain. And within 2 weeks of having a mobile phone around, that is permeable, that blood-brain barrier. It allows albumin to go in, and permanent death of neurons. So that's one of the four effects of electromagnetic artificial energies in the body. Okay, so moving on to that cheerful topic. Cell gateways, we know about colour in our physiology. Luckily, there's been a lot of Nobel interest around light recently. 2017 a prize was won for the circadian rhythm, the genes that run the circadian rhythm, which is not just the sleep-wake cycle, okay? It's actually our energy levels during the day. And in animals, it would be, well, what tells them to grow a furry coat? I mean, they have to grow the coat before the weather gets cold, right? So it's not a temperature signal, it's a light signal. Elephant seals need all to give birth within a 2-week period, or else it's too cold for the babies. Therefore, they have to all ovulate together. So what tells them to do that? These are circadian rhythms. 1998, it was Nobel Prize for the nitrous oxide cycle, which is the fact that natural light penetrates the skin and dilates our blood vessels. So this is a natural cure for, say, hypertension or stress, things that make the blood vessels constrict. Then we've got the numerous effects of the light going in our eyes, okay, in a hypothalamus and pituitary, the master glands. So I think it's a no-brainer, the effect that colours might have on your body and light in general. All these major things. Photobiomodulation, we've talked about a lot. Hippocrates, father of medicine, around 500 AD, was big on this. He was huge on it, and they practiced heliotherapy and various forms of light healing through crystals then. I've got an infrared here because I personally love infrared frequencies, and I use them almost on a daily basis on myself, and I use them on my patients. I didn't mention in that that photo of the Vietnamese boat people, I was in a hospital treating tuberculosis, and another synchronicity here that I did not know at the time is that Auguste Rollier in the 19th century was the Swiss doctor who was called the heliotherapy king. He treated this horrible disease of tuberculosis by light therapy. And of course, and now we know that light actually kills, it's a bacterium, right? Light does actually kill it. He halved the mortality rate. Now, if a drug halves the death rate, that's huge, isn't it? He halved the death rate of tuberculosis by his Swiss sanatorium techniques. Auguste Rollier, one of the fathers of light medicine, started off treating tuberculosis this way. And this is all photobiomodulation, light affecting biology. Now, a little bit more complex here because it's worth mentioning. I'm big on connecting our energies to the energy of nature. So there's these words like quantum biology, quantum computing. What do they really mean? Well, when the sun grasps the energy, when the plants grasp the energy of the sun, okay, so through photosynthesis, the plant is grasping these photons of light and then transferring them into carbohydrates in the leaf. And they do this with an astounding 95% efficiency. I mean, we can't do this stuff, I can tell you now. 95% of that energy is collected by the plant. And because we can't do it on a physical basis, scientists then looked at exactly how they did do it. And it's only really in 2016 that these professors in California, Dr. Engel, realized that there was something about the protein structure that allowed this transfer, and it's all about electrons and what we call superposition between chromophores. So what that means is How did the electrons get to A to B so quickly? They had to do it incredibly quickly to go to the storage place for the light. So they got the grasp of the light, the plant grasps the photons of light, then it's got to transfer it for storage. And the question was, how do they know where to go, really? And they discovered they did this by something called quantum superposition, which means that, you know, an electron, if it's going from here to the back of the room, would actually try 1,000 different variations. Maybe it would go to the swimming pool and back, or maybe it would go to the edge of the room and back. But it does these 1,000 variations of the pathway at the same time. So somehow, because photons of light are out of time, so it can do that. We could do that, but they can. So quantum superposition, and this is quantum tunneling, quantum biology, if that explains it. Somehow the electrons manage to, they know the best pathway, yes, but they only know because they're doing it all at the same time. As I say, one going to the swimming pool and back, one going to the toilets and back, and then they're working it out all at the same time. And chlorophyll is the green stuff in plants that does all this photosynthesis, and is quite similar actually in structure to our hemoglobin, which I think is very interesting because of course the hemoglobin is that which carries the oxygen, our energy, right? And it's also got the iron, so the iron, as we'll discuss, which resonates with the big mother lode of iron in the centre of the planet, right? So this is one of our connections to the earth and to the trees. It's not identical, of course, but it's similar. And the other thing is the actual genes are identical, involved in transducing sugar, you know, from light in a plant and a human being. They're almost identical, and we share a huge amount of our genes with the plant world also. So imagine we have hemoglobin molecules in our body, the red blood cells, right? They hold oxygen because they do it because of their iron. And so we're little magnetic beings, aren't we, with iron zooming around us. And we're standing on this planet with a rotating iron core. That's a dynamo. So a rotating iron core is a dynamo. And we can already see the magnetic connections that might be happening, that our forebears knew about it. These Aborigine people, you know, they didn't have modern medicine or modern technology, but like us, they had their body and their five senses. And they knew that by connection to the earth, that somehow they'd be better off. Because that's what people care about, really, isn't it? They'd be better off. And they knew that they'd be better off by living in harmony with the natural world and respecting it. They knew that true wholeness came through resonating with the natural world. So my next book is going to be on flowing into wellness through connection to nature. Because this is something that we undoubtedly have lost, but only just recently people are beginning to talk about forest bathing in Hong Kong, or Shinrin-yoku in Japan, is this quality of healing through nature, that somehow our nervous systems maybe co-regulate with these very slow-growing animals. And I call them animals because, you know, we've discovered trees have five senses. I was in Damanhur in northern Italy, and the final one, which was hearing, was proven to me. I have a video of a small orange plant, and the electromagnetic energy was transduced into a frequency, and it's talking to me, and it was responding to me, I would say. I shouldn't say talking. And there was a lovely situation where one of these little transducers was on a tree in a garden, but the microphone was, you know, the loudspeaker, was in a different place, so you couldn't tell which tree the sound came from. And a baby went into the garden, and immediately, although the loudspeaker was over here, the baby immediately knew the source of this sound was over there, immediately locked onto it, and started gurgling like babies do, which is not unusual. But what was unusual was that the noise coming from the tree then changed subtly to mimic the baby. So we made a baby mimicking a tree is nothing normal, or mimicking a noise is nothing normal, but this loudspeaker that was transducing the energy of the tree then changed to mimic the baby, which is rather sweet. Moving on away from photosynthesis, because that's who we are, right? We eat plants to give us energy, and then we are the plant. That's what gives us our energy. And whether we eat animals that eat plants or we're vegetarians, we're made up of this building block, of these incredibly clever plants that capture 95% of the energy of the photons. And this is the soup that we are in. This is the water, right? And these are the ripples. So I believe this is what happens when I'm in the therapy room with that patient with a headache. Like all of us, we all have electromagnetic energy radiating out in circles from us. And remember, these don't stop. Light keeps going in time. That's another profound thought, isn't it? This keeps going in time, it doesn't stop. So it will go to the end of the universe. All of us. All time, all space. But you see there's an overlap of my energy with the patient's energy, and in this overlap of energy, this is the area for interpretation and for action, let's say. So I'm talking tomorrow afternoon about intuition, but when one of my light waves hits another light wave, I don't just get information about that one point, I get information about the whole wave. A huge amount of information if I know how to interpret it, and we all know that. We meet someone and we like them, we think, oh, I like them, or I don't trust them, right? We're all familiar with that feeling. We have an immediate intuition about something. So this is not a too bizarre an idea. We're very familiar with feeling that expansion, that wonderful piece of nature, or that cramped-in feeling at a busy cash point when people are pressing around you, right? Their light energy is just too close to you. And the other thing is the arena for healing here, because well, as Rasmus explained to us, we're into holographic realms because the overlap of two light fields in physics creates a standing wave, and this is a hologram. So we've now got three entities. We've got me, the patient, and we've got the hologram. And we're both part of this hologram, right? So there's the thing. This is how change occurs. We're both part of this hologram. And so in the quantum world, which is the light world, right? The light world is the quantum world because photons are about quanta. Photons are the tiniest units of light. In the light world, tiny changes make a huge difference. So just being, and you know, being in someone's energy, right? You suddenly feel better, or you don't. You might feel worse. You've had lunch with an angry friend who's just got divorced, and it's not good. You don't feel so good. So we're marinating in the energy, and people don't heal each other, as has been said, that the body's perfectly capable of healing itself. But sometimes a little trigger, a little pointer in the right direction. Maybe it's a bit of light therapy, or maybe it's just a kind word, and the presence of another energy that makes that trigger, okay, that presses that button. And there is no linear progression here. I mean, diagnosis, talking, healing, because these quanta and photons are out of time, so there's no reason whatsoever there should be a linear progression and that one should precede the other. So I believe with me in that situation with the headache patient, I believe in the energy of the heart as being huge, as being enormous, although healing is a whole-bodied phenomena, in my opinion. And my heart field, well, I'm going to go on about that a little bit later, because moving on to my new obsession, bacteria. Okay, so we have 39 trillion bacteria in our bodies, about 30 trillion cells. This is 2019 research, which is why I'm mentioning it. It's always nice to have new research, isn't it? So they've discovered these pili, a little bit like the spider web, the purple spider web. That was 20 years ago, though. The pilus basically are wires. So we think we're wired with our Wi-Fi IDs. Bacteriums are totally wired. They're totally connected everywhere. First of all, they found them in the mud flats. And I was reminded here in Cairns by all that mud outside. I thought, oh gosh, that's a little hotbed of electrical activity, is what I thought. Because these are nanowires. And this year in April, we found that there's two things. First of all, the pili are the wires. Secondly, different wires are made from like a stack of coins, the cytochrome of bacteria being laid on top of each other, just like a stack of coins. But wait for this, in 1 inch of mud, there's 8 miles of nanowires, 8 miles. 1 inch. So, of course, they're finding them in, just muddy flats, and then they look more and they find more. So why do we talk about this? Because actually we've got 39 trillion bacteria. This is us, guys. This is us. And that's so networked, it's not true. It's also been, and this is just, as I say, we found that these extensions have a heme molecule inside them, because there was nothing in our science that could explain how the protein structure conducted electrons, nothing. But in April, we found there's a heme iron molecule to conduct electrons and electricity. These are the little things that make things work, and without those little extensions, we can't get infections either, by the way. So they use them for the little infective purposes, bacteriums. So, fun fact. So back to this premise again, that we're all connected in this soup, and sort of use it unconsciously on a daily basis in our kind word, in our healing thoughts. Well, I do that all the time, of course. So, my friend Andrew Wong, he's an infectious diseases consultant in Hong Kong, and this is one of his, what I described being in the heart energy. Energies joined together, the energy swirls around the room, my hands feel very warm and comfortable with compassion. And what causes this, and how can, how can we do this, right? Well, obviously we all have our wonderful practices, and I know a lot of you are therapists, but this is what I want to look at. My research and my work is almost like the nuts and bolts of this, because this is where we want to go. DNA, I believe, are not just a blueprint, but a storage medium for optical information and an organ of communication, the light of the DNA, okay? So 2 Russians worth noting. Both are in the Russian Academy of Science. Vladimir Popinin, some decades ago, proved the phantom DNA effect. Okay, you've got a flask, vacuum, with a bit of DNA in it. You shine a light on it, and just like in this photo, the light accumulates around the DNA. That is not a surprise, because it's a bit of matter, okay? So light accumulating around DNA would be normal, really, wouldn't it? But maybe what's not normal is you take that bit of matter, the DNA, out of the flask again, and you shine, guess what? The light is still in the shape of a DNA. So you take the matter out, you got rid of the DNA now out of the flask, you shine your laser light, and the laser light accumulates in the shape of a DNA, but there's no DNA there. So, obviously, that's called the phantom DNA. Obviously, our DNA has some energy, other than the physical matter, that attracts light. So that was 20 years ago, but it was the only experiment done, proper one, when I wrote my book about light and DNA, and it's really, and I think it's still amazing. Moving on quickly to Piotr Garayev, and they know each other in Russia. He did a lot of work on skin cancers and light. He managed to find, this is very recent, that the programming photons of light coming out of the DNA, right? So, as we've discussed, DNA is emitting light, and the actual programming photons that he had a salamander embryo with eggs, and he had embryo, not eggs, embryo, and he had a frog embryo, right? And he found the communicating information from the DNA, but what he found is when he projected salamander DNA at the frog embryo became a salamander. So it was a genuine in-your-face frog that then changed. So when he shone the light on them, do you get what I'm saying? So the DNA programming completely did its job. And it's just, I just added on the end here in California, in Berkeley, 2 years ago. The whole wisdom of biofluorescence was that our body did not biofluoresce, but guess what? That's a chemical property. In 2016, we found that, in fact, it does biofluoresce also. So kind of older research and up-to-date research. One of my great interests is in training for the healing energies with the planet. Now, quick fact here for those of you who like facts. Sorry about lack of stories, but it's really interesting. There's a million lightning strikes per day on the Earth, on the planet. Okay, we have a lot of lightning strikes. Lightning strikes are what give us our Schumann resonance. So lightning strikes hits the atmosphere. Electromagnetic energy creates, well, the ionosphere is created by lightning strikes a lot. So we have this standing wave going around our planet, basically, at the speed of light, because it's light, caused by the lightning strikes, the huge energy. So right away, you've got this atmosphere all around the Earth that is one of light. And this is pretty significant. If you look at this drawing with the rotating magnetic iron core dynamo of the center of the Earth, creating its electromagnetic energy, and then up there above it you've got the ionosphere electrically charged. So if you want, you can take a photo of the slide. There's been a lot of studies talking about the Schumann resonance, roughly 7.8 hertz, except for 2 weeks ago it went up to 30. Anyone feel frazzled 2 weeks ago? Yeah, I had to spend a day in bed. Went up to 30, so that's lovely, isn't it? The core resonance of the Earth, 7.8 to 30. We don't know why. So I believe that true healing happens. So this is just for interesting studies linking psychic phenomena to the Schumann resonance of the Earth and healing phenomena. I believe that healing happens with periodic entrainment of brain waves and heart waves, a whole-bodied wave, in fact, biomagnetic emissions with the Schumann resonance of the Earth's atmosphere. So down here we have Donut Man, the Taurus, with the purple Taurus, which is a heart math graphic of the electromagnetic energy of the heart, in fact, merely magnetic energy of the heart, many times that of the brain. Our feeling organ, okay, and the energy of the Earth. And I believe that opening our heart in compassion, that great expression, lots of other people have examples of healing, and the ones we read about in books, the miracles. Miracles happen every day in our lives, though, don't they? It comes through accessing our abilities to connect our heart energy with that of the Earth, and by the Earth I include the Schumann resonance. So when I talk about planetary healing, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not going out of our solar system yet, because then it would get a bit confusing. Frankly, might confuse myself completely. So real healing comes through aligning ourself, our spirit, with that huge energy that perhaps our forebears knew a lot better than us how to tap into through their ancient techniques of qigong or native healings, becoming that conduit between heaven and earth, as they say in China. And having lived in Hong Kong for 30 years, I'm very aware of I teach qigong, and I'm very into Chinese medicine. So I love that Chinese idea that, especially the emperor, well, really the emperor, wasn't it, was the conduit between heaven and earth. He was the connection. So in my office, this is my idea. This is me in my office doing something practical. And this is, I think there's so many energetic phenomena. If you want to talk about science, I think we have magnetic energy and all the rest I talked about in our hands. Good old-fashioned inductance, like an inductance coil. I mean, that's a fact. That's proven. Inductance happens in every cell of the body. But we've got the quantum tunneling we talked about in photosynthesis undoubtedly going on. And we've got non-local phenomena, because once you have photons, you have what they call non-local phenomena, and I'm huge on holographic theory. Huge. But you know what? men would like, the men that I seem to talk with would love you to believe it's my theory and it's the right one. That's the paradigm, isn't it? You write a paper and you're right about it. It's not true. It's all correct. I can tell you now, this is all happening, and we will never, ever, ever find out, the exact answer, but we're getting closer to it, and it's all going on. All these things are correct, so no one is wrong and right, because it's all happening. Holographic theory is lovely, and I'm so glad that it's been explained before me, because I can never explain it properly. But I love to think of this Russian doll scenario where one small energy is inside another, almost, although I know that's not really what it is. But imagine a little fetus inside a mother's womb, whose heart energy is radiating out into the mother's heart energy, imprinting, resonating, harmonizing. And then her energy is standing on the earth, and perhaps she's harmonizing with that energy in the core of the earth. And then also we have the greater energy of our sun, which undoubtedly affects us so much, doesn't it? The enormous electromagnetic energies that the solar flares, the energy that wiped out the electricity of Quebec for over 12 hours, about 20 years ago, affects our satellites, our solar system. It's serious energy. We cannot ignore that. So a sort of holographic relationship of all these things that affect us. So this is, I'm sure this is all going on. As I say, not one or the other. So much is going on, and there's all so much to talk about. So in my example of the patient John, I believed in the letting go. Someone said that to me today, in the letting go process. But there was intent there. There was intent also. Intent's very important, because even though I was a bit tired and fed up, I have intent, and my room is set up for that intention. In the beginning, I have intent. It's kind of the overriding hologram of my life, because that's what I do. And that's all I do. I'm very focused on it. And then the letting go of my personality resistance and annoying baggage. And then just whatever, just doing something, just touch him, you just think I'll just touch his head. But it worked. So I think it's a good example of less is more, maybe. That's a less is more example, isn't it? And so I'm looking at my time, a little bit conscious of that. We talked about the healing effects of light, and others certainly did a lot. Our connection to nature's light, our connection to planetary light, yes, the Schumann resonance, energy at the core of the earth, using this light for our well-being. So this is really workshop material, using it. However, I'm going to, part of the closing ceremony, I will do an exercise that will use it, that you will feel. And more, I'm going to do an exercise before we finish. So this is after my Palo Alto workshop. We've all got experiences we haven't really got an explanation for. And it's important to learn how to connect to your intuition and learn the mechanism of what's happening between yourself and clients if you're a therapist. If not, just focus on your wife or husband, because that will be enough. Mechanisms of what happened in a marriage. We've learned so much today from all the other speakers, with Rasmus's first talk and this amazing, the sound of the soul was so profound, right? How wonderful was that? And Wilma's wonderful service of getting up so early, helping us connect. And then that so interesting light information that was from Jan van der Est, that was so succinctly explained. We've learned the camera and the colour therapy, and Vanessa's really interesting sound work with the fifths. It was just incredible. I've left a few people out here, so don't take offence, because all the talks have been extraordinary. I've got some meditations that are actually the tools on that bit of paper that I gave you. So you've got a page, Australasian Light Association page, with some videos and tools to practice. What was I going to say? And then I want to finish with this, because Professor Persinger in the Laurentian University, he's unfortunately passed away in the last year, but he proved that thinking about white light doubles the output of white light from the brain and retina. You understand, all matter produces light. I mean, even though we are wonderfully superior beings as humans, all matter produces light, in fact, right? But doubling it is interesting. And this was all photons emitted and action firing potential. So I'd like to do a little exercise in this. And if you want to connect to me, I've got all the media going. I'd be delighted to connect to you any other point. If not, welcome you to my website or see you in the workshop. But so right now, the white light exercise is a little bit like the one we did in the beginning, but it's so valuable because simple things work. But humans like to make them very complicated because we think we're so smart. But we're not. Okay, little things work. So what's really wonderful is to, if I can invite you to shut your eyes once more or look at the light. And breathing through your nose, we imagine we're in a waterfall of white light. We've all stood in a wonderful waterfall in nature, and it's crashing down over our heads, and it's so refreshing. But because it's light, it's coming right through our bodies as well as around our bodies. So it's light and it's scintillating, sparkling, shimmering. And it's flooding through our head, our neck, arms, torso, our back, hips and legs. It's so nice, it's so refreshing, and white light is made up of all the colours in the spectrum, so every colour is represented in this light, and any colour that is going to be beneficial for your body is going to take out of the light. Your body's taking what it needs. It's taking red, yellow, green. Your body is taking what it needs out of this light. Continuous, never-ending flow from above your head. And as it's discharged into the earth, it goes into the earth and it takes anything you don't need. Your tiredness, fatigue, dis-ease, anxieties and worries. Never-ending supply. It's like a tap is opened above you, this waterfall of light. On the top of our head, sucking it in. We know how our bodies are hardwired to light, and it's very capable of absorbing the frequency of light it desires. You might like to take a deep breath and open your eyes again, and feeling relaxed and rejuvenated, come back to the room. Now you don't have to if you're feeling too relaxed, so the energy of the room's really changed now. However, I am available to answer any questions if you would like. Are there any questions? Yes.
I was just interested when you talked about human resonance going from 7 to 30. Where were you able to get the information about?
Right. So the Schumann resonance going from 7.8, which is like, hangs out there, to 30. Well, very good question. I subscribe to NASA alerts for a start, because solar flares deeply affect me. I'm really sensitive to them. It's not easy in a solar flare, and at least it explains why my body aches so much and I'm so tired. Solar flares will really affect me. So I do subscribe to NASA. I'm not convinced it was on NASA though. So I maybe got the information from somewhere else. Sorry, I can't remember. But then I investigated it and it was true.
HeartMath usually
Do they? Yes, maybe they do, yeah. Because it's a major thing and no one knew why. It's huge. I mean, it couldn't be bigger, imagine. It's like we're getting a lightning strike almost, isn't it? It certainly felt like it to me. about 2 or 3 weeks ago or something. And it was only for a few hours, but it's crazy.
Susan, I work with sound, and on the web, as you know, there's a lot of 7.83 sound bites. Has anyone done any work of combining certain light with the sound so that you get the Schumann resonance? Because everyone's working here with light, or some are, you know.
Yeah.
And the difference between, say, using white or violet, or, you know, the spectrum with the sound. Anyone done any of that?
I'm sure the music therapists have done tons of that, yes, but I don't. What I do know is, it sounds a funny thing. 128 beats a minute cues your nervous system into trance, as an example. That's why drumming and rattling is so fast. So I'm not particularly into that, but it's very powerful, and Vanessa's done a lot of that. It's very powerful used together. Very, yeah. So, anything else you'd like to know? Well, in that case, that's wonderful. You could always ask me later anyway if anything comes to you, because I think we're going to move on to the closing ceremony now.